Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 5, Moderates and Extremists, Dadabhai Naroji, M.G. Ranade, and B.G. Tilak. Let us have introduction about the unit. The nationalist movement was articulated differently in different phases of India's freedom struggle. Apart from ideological shifts, there were noticeable differences in the social background of those who participated in the struggle against the British. For instance, the Gandhi phase of Indian nationalism, also known as the phase of mass nationalism, radically altered the nature of the constituencies of nationalism by ending the hitherto neglected section of Indian society. It would not be an exaggeration to mention that Indian masses, regardless of religion, class, and caste, plunged into action in response to Gandhi's anti British campaign that Gandhi had inaugurated a completely new phase in Indian freedom struggle can easily be shown by contrasting it with its earlier phases, namely the moderate and the extremist phases. In contemporary historiography, the moderate phase begins with the formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885 and continued till the 1907 Surat Congress, when the extremists appeared on the political scene. The basic differences between these two groups lay in their perception of anti British struggle and its articulation in concrete programs. While the moderates opposed the British in a strictly constitutional way, the extremists favored a strategy of direct action to harm the British economic and political interest in India. By dwelling on what caused the dissensation among those who sincerely believed in the well-being of the country, the aim of this unit is also to focus on the major personalities who sought to articulate as coherently as possible the respective ideological point of view. Now, the next point is defining moderates and extremists. While moderates and extremists constitute contrasting viewpoints, their contribution to the freedom struggle in its early phase is nonetheless significant. Moderates like Dadabhai Naroji, Surendranath Banerjee, Feroz Shah Mehta, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, M.G. Ranade were uncritical admirers of Western political values. They held the concept of equality before law, of freedom of speech and press, and the principle of representative government as inherently superior to their traditional Hindu polity, which they defined as Asiatic despotism. So empathetic was their faith in the British rule that they hailed its introduction in India as a providential mission. capable of eradicating the misrule of the past. Given the reluctance of the crown to introduce representative institutions in India, Dadabhai Naroji lamented that the British government in India was more Raj and less British. What he meant was that though the British rule fulfilled the basic functions of Hindu kingship in preserving law and order in India, its reluctance to introduce the principle of representative government was most disappointing. So, despite their appreciation of British liberalism, their admiration hardly influenced the Raj in changing the basic nature of its rule in India. Now, the next point is moderate ideology. The moderate philosophy was most eloquently articulated by Surendranath Banerjee in 1848 to 1925 in his 1895 presidential address to the Congress. In appreciation of the British rule, Banerjee thus argued, we appeal to England gradually to change character of her rule in India, to liberalize it, to adapt it to the newly developed environment of the country and the people, so that in the fullness of time, India may find itself in the great confederacy of free state. England in their origin, English in their character, English in their institution, rejoicing in their permanent and dissoluble union with England. It seems that the moderates were swayed by British liberalism and were persuaded to believe that in the long run the crown would fulfill its providential mission. Banerjee appears to have echoed the idea of Dadabhai Naroji 1825 to 1917, who in his 1893 Pune address underlined the importance of loyalty to the British in protecting India's future. As he stated, until we are able to satisfy the British people that what we ask in is reasonable and that we ask it in earnest, we cannot hope to get what we ask for the British are a justice loving people, and their hands we shall get everything that is calculated to make us British citizens. Despite his loyalist attitude, Nauroji was perhaps the first congressman who argued strongly for a political role for the Congress that so far we were not identified as a known political platforms. While conceptualizing the role of Congress in the British ruled India, Nauroji had no hesitation in announcing that the Congress as a political body to represent to our rulers our political aspirations. There are 2 points that need to be highlighted here. First, as evident, the moderates identified specific role for the Congress that sought to mobilize people in accordance with what was constructed as a most appropriate goal in that context. The guiding principle was to avoid friction with the ruler. In fact, this is how G.K. Gokhale explained the birth of the Indian National Congress. According to him, no Indian could have started the Indian National Congress if an Indian had come forward to start such a movement embracing all India. The official of India would not have allowed the movement to come into existence. Secondly, the philosophy stemmed from an uncritical faith of the early nationalists in the providential mission of the British, and hence the British conquest of India was not a calamity to be laminated, but an opportunity to be seized to our advantage. So it was not surprising for Ranade to uncritically appreciate the British nation that came into existence by ages of struggle and self discipline, which illustrates better than any other contemporary power the supremacy of the reign of law. This is what differentiated the British government from other colonial powers which endorsed a different system of law for the colonies. The British nation therefore inspires hope and confidence in colonies and dependencies of Great Britain that whatever temporary perturbation may cloud the judgment, the reign of law was assert itself in the end. Thirdly, the moderates believed that the continuity of British rule was sine qua non of India's progress as a civilized nation. In other words, the introduction of the British rule was a boon in disguise simply because Hindus and Muslims in India, argued Ranade, lacked the virtues represented by the love of order and regulated authority. Hailing the British rule as divine dispensation, he further appreciated the British government for having introduced Indians to the example of teaching of most gifted and free nation in the world. Finally, Ranade defended a strong British state in India to ensure equality of wealth and opportunity for all. By justifying state intervention in India's socio-economic life, he differed substantially from the basic tenets of liberalism that clearly restricts the role of the state to well-defined domain. Here, the moderate performed a historical role by underlining the relative superiority of a state drawn on the philosophy of enlightenment in comparison with the decadent feudal rule of the past. To them, the imperial state that gradually unfolded with its devastating impact on India's economy, society, and polity was a distant object, and hence the idea never gained ground in their perception and its articulation. Underlying the moderate arguments defending the British rule in India lay its disciplining function in comparison with the division and disorder of the 18th century, and also the exploitative nature of imperialism and its devastating role in colonies did not appear to be as relevant as it later became. So, the moderate assessment of British rule, if contextualized, seems to be appropriate and drawn on a new reality that was clearly a break with the past. Finally, it would be wrong to dismiss the role of the moderates in India's freedom struggle, given their loyalist attitude to the rule for two reasons. There is no denying that the moderates never launched mass agitations against the alien state in India, but by providing an ideological critique of the British rule in India, keeping in view the grand ideals on which the British civilizations stood, they actually initiated a political dialogue that loomed large in course of time, and the moderates' constitutional and peaceful method of political mobilization, if contextualized, seems to be a milestone in India's freedom struggle, for it paved the ground for other kinds of anti-imperial context once it ceased to be effective. Now we want to wind up this lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.